The rain did not merely fall from the sky, it assaulted the old house with relentless purpose. Sheets of water slammed against the slate roof, each impact echoing like a drumbeat in a slow, punishing march. Wind drove the rain sideways, forcing it into every crack and crevice of the ancient stone facade. Then came the heavy, reverberating strike of a massive brass knocker against the wooden door. Once, twice, its metallic cry swallowed almost instantly by the storm. When the door finally creaked open, the chaos outside was cut short, muffled as if the world itself had been sealed away. Inside, a grandfather clock dominated the silence, its ticking loud and authoritarian, measuring time with cold indifference. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, dust, and centuries of forgotten hands.
You are late. 2 minutes late.
His voice emerged from the darkness of the hall before his body did, low and distant, as though the house itself were speaking. The words did not accuse so much as record a fact, precise and unforgiving. The ticking clock seemed to lean into the pause that followed, each second stretching and amplifying the weight of his judgment. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, and Alara stood just inside the threshold, water dripping from her coat onto the marble floor, each drop sounding far louder than it should have. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwood, the bus didn't come up the hill. I had to walk." Her teeth chattered despite her effort to keep her voice steady. Cold had seeped deep into her bones during the climb, and now it clung to her skin, heavy and humiliating. Rain darkened her hair, plastering strands against her cheeks, and her shoes squelched faintly when she shifted her weight. The apology felt inadequate, even as she spoke it, shrinking under the oppressive quiet of the house and the unseen scrutiny of the man before her.
You are wet. Moisture is the enemy of paper. Do not step on the rug. Stand on the marble.
Arthur Blackwood stepped forward at last, emerging from the shadows with deliberate precision. A velvet vest hugged his frame, immaculate despite the gloom, and white cotton gloves covered his hands like ceremonial armor. His gaze traveled over Alara, not with concern, but with appraisal, as one might inspect a damaged artifact. The marble beneath her feet was icy, leaching what little warmth remained in her body, while the ornate rug beside her looked almost sacred, untouched, preserved, and forbidden. "I applied for the assistant position, for the cataloging." The words came out haltingly, snagging on her breath. She straightened instinctively, as if posture alone could convince him she belonged here. The hall seemed to loom larger with every second, shelves disappearing into darkness, their contents silently judging her presence. This was the place she had imagined for months, yet now that she stood inside it, it felt less like an opportunity and more like a trial.
I saw your CV, top of your class at Oxford. Then a sudden dropout. Burnout, they call it. Why are you here, Alara? You could be working at a tech company.
He began to circle her slowly, footsteps measured and almost predatory. Each pass tightened the knot in her chest. His words were sharp, but delivered with detached curiosity, as though he were flipping through a file rather than dissecting a person. The mention of Oxford landed heavily, dredging up memories she had tried to seal away, late nights, impossible expectations, and the quiet collapse no one had noticed until it was complete. "Because I like quiet, and I like old things. They don't expect anything from you." As she spoke, her gaze drifted to the towering shelves and shadowed corners, to the weight of history pressing gently but insistently against the walls. Old things endured without judgment. They waited. The thought steadied her just enough to get the words out. In the silence that followed, her heartbeat felt deafening, a living intrusion in a house devoted to stillness.
Extend your hands.
He stopped circling abruptly, the motion ending with surgical finality. The command cut through the air, precise and impersonal. Alara hesitated, uncertainty flashing across her face, the cold gnawing harder now as anticipation set her nerves alight. "What?"
Your hands palms down. I need to see if they shake. Restoration requires the stillness of a surgeon.
She raised her hands slowly, every movement magnified by fear. Her breath came fast, fogging faintly in the cool air. The house seemed to watch, the clock counting down each tremor. This was no longer an interview. It was an examination, and she felt painfully exposed beneath his unwavering stare. Her fingers quivered despite her effort to control them. Cold, exhaustion, and adrenaline conspired against her, sending tiny, traitorous tremors through her hands. She tried to will them still, to summon the calm she once had in libraries and archives, but her body refused to listen.
They are shaking. You are unstable. If you hold a scalpel to a 15th century vellum page, you will slice it. Go home, Alara. You are not ready.
His sigh carried disappointment rather than cruelty, which somehow made it worse. The verdict fell with finality, each sentence sealing her failure. The clock ticked on, indifferent, while the word unstable echoed in her mind, attaching itself to fears she had never fully silenced. Please, they shake because I'm cold and because I'm scared of you. Give me a task, any task. If I fail, I'll leave. Desperation cracked through her composure. The plea burst out before she could stop it, raw and unfiltered. Fear coiled tightly in her chest, but beneath it burned something fiercer. Refusal. She could not walk back into the rain carrying another quiet defeat.
Very well. Sort these chronologically by ink type. You have 1 hour. Do not make a sound.
Silence stretched between them, broken only by the relentless ticking of the clock. At last, Arthur reached for a stack of disorganized papers, their edges yellowed and fragile, and placed them before her like a challenge. The task was simple in description and merciless in execution. As he withdrew, the house seemed to close in around Alara, granting her exactly what she had asked for. 1 hour, a test of stillness, and the oppressive, watchful quiet of the archive. The library breathed like a living organism around her, with shelves rising in solemn columns and a quiet fire warming the ancient stone as unseen eyes followed her every movement. Alara worked with reverent precision, steadying her hands with each breath and treating the manuscript as a living thing while unaware that her diligence was being tested. From the balcony, Arthur observed in stillness, noting her fear and the care with which she handled each fragile page. He judged that respect, not confidence, guided her movements, and that this respect hinted she was not as broken as she believed. Thunder exploded outside, rattling the windows and snapping the fire as the library flinched and the calm shattered for a heartbeat. Alara gasped as a pen cup tipped and spilled across the desk, the clatter echoing in the hushed room like an accusation. Oh no. Cold seized her as memories surged, and she curled inward, bracing for a blow that did not come. Footsteps descended from the shadows with measured urgency, carrying authority and promise of judgment.
Stop. Do not move.
Alara kept her eyes down as panic drove her words out before she could think. I dropped a pen. I did not mean to. Arthur lowered himself beside her, focused on the desk and the manuscript rather than her fear.
Is there ink? Did the pen leak?
Confusion cut through her fear as she searched for damage. No, the cap was on. Arthur exhaled with clear relief, tension easing as disaster was avoided.
Good.
Seeing her fear, his authority softened into genuine curiosity.
Why are you curling into a ball? Do you think I am going to strike you?
The question pierced deeply as the past pressed close. My professor used to throw books when I made mistakes. Understanding settled over Arthur as anger flared at the unseen man.
That man was a barbarian. Books are not projectiles. They are vessels of souls.
He rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder, careful and grounding.
Stand up. You passed the test.
Disbelief crossed her face as she lifted her head. I did, but I dropped the pen. Arthur glanced at the pristine manuscript and back to her.
You passed because your first instinct was to protect the manuscript, not yourself. You threw your body over the papers when the thunder hit. I saw it. You have the instinct of a guardian. The job is yours.
Morning arrived quietly in the old house, not with an alarm or urgency, but with a gradual unfurling of sound and light. Birds stitched their calls together outside the tall windows, a living tapestry of notes that drifted into the archive room. Somewhere nearby, coffee was being poured. The dark, liquid meeting ceramic with a soft, intimate murmur. Steam rose and carried with it a bitter warmth that cut gently through the perpetual chill of paper, leather, and time. The house felt awake, but restrained, as if even the walls knew they were custodians of fragile things.
Put these on.
Arthur's voice broke the quiet without breaking its spell. He stood already at the long work table, posture precise, movements economical. In his hands were white cotton gloves, pristine and unwrinkled, held out not as a suggestion, but as a rule. The light caught on the fabric, making them seem almost ceremonial, an initiation rather than a precaution. Gloves? The question hovered between them. Simple, but loaded. Gloves were never just gloves in this house. They were borders, permissions, a way of deciding what could be touched and what must remain distant. Elodie's gaze moved from his face to the gloves, sensing the weight of unspoken history stitched into their seams.
Cotton, 100%. The oils from human skin are acidic. Over time, they burn the paper. From now on, you do not touch anything in this house without a barrier, except your food and your own body.
As he spoke, Arthur did not lecture so much as recite a personal creed. Each sentence was measured, practiced, born of years, watching irreplaceable things crumble under careless hands. To him, skin was not warmth or comfort. It was a threat, an unseen corrosion. The pause before his final exception carried a strange intimacy, a reminder that even in his world of barriers, there were limits to control. Alara took the gloves from him, the cotton cool and almost weightless. As she pulled them on, the fabric slid over her fingers with a faint whisper, smoothing over knuckles and sealing her skin away from the world. The sensation was oddly soothing, like being wrapped in silence. Each finger found its place as if the gloves had been waiting for her specifically, molded by anticipation. They fit perfectly. She turned her hands slightly, inspecting them, flexing her fingers. The gloves did not resist her. They followed her movements faithfully, an extension rather than a restraint. The perfection of the fit unsettled her more than if they had been loose.
I measured your hands with my eyes yesterday. Now come here. I am working on a Gutenberg Bible. The binding is cracking. I need you to hold the spine, gently, like you are holding a bird.
Arthur stepped aside, revealing the book laid open on the table. The Gutenberg Bible rested there like a sleeping relic, its pages thick with centuries, its binding strained by the weight of survival. Tools lay arranged nearby with surgical precision. His instruction was careful, almost tender, and the comparison to a bird was not poetic exaggeration. One wrong pressure, one careless shift, and history itself could be injured. They moved closer together, the space between them shrinking until it was no longer empty, but charged. Arthur bent over the book, metal tools glinting softly as he adjusted his grip. Alara placed her gloved hands along the spine, feeling the subtle tension within it, the quiet resistance of aged leather and thread. She held still, aware of her own breathing, of the heat of another body so near.
Closer. I cannot see the stitch if you stand so far away.
The word was gentle, but it carried authority. The request narrowed the distance to something intimate, unavoidable. The archive seemed to hold its breath, shelves looming like silent witnesses. "Is this okay?" She stepped in, carefully, until her shoulder almost brushed his arm. Her voice was quiet, cautious, as if volume alone could cause damage. The book trembled imperceptibly under her hands, Or perhaps it was her own pulse she felt.
You smell of vanilla soap. It is distracting.
Arthur paused mid-motion. His tools hovered above the page, arrested by something entirely unaccounted for in his calculations. The scent cut through the archive's usual atmosphere of dust and old glue, a soft, human note that did not belong to decay or preservation. For a moment, he seemed almost disoriented by it. I can change it. The offer came quickly, reflexively. She was used to adjusting, to making herself smaller or more neutral when asked, even implicitly.
No, the archive usually smells of dust and decay. It is pleasant to smell something alive. Steady your breathing, Alara. Imagine your breath flowing into the book, giving it life.
He returned to his work, though his movements were slower now, more deliberate. His words softened, losing their edge of instruction and gaining something almost reverent. As Alara breathed, she imagined warmth traveling from her chest into her hands, through the gloves, into the spine of the book. The idea felt impossible and yet intimate, as if she were being asked to share something essential. Arthur? Her voice slipped out before she fully decided to speak, shaped by a sudden awareness she could not ignore.
Your turn.
He did not look up at first, attention still fixed on the fragile stitch, but the single word was open, inviting. Your hand is touching mine. The observation was simple, factual, yet it landed heavily. The contact had been there long enough to feel intentional, or at least unrescinded.
So it is. Do you want me to move it?
Arthur finally looked down. His gloved hand rested against hers, cotton against cotton, a barrier layered over a barrier. Even so, the connection felt unmistakable, a quiet crossing of rules he himself had written. No, it feels safe. The word settled between them, fragile and brave. Neither moved. The book remained steady, the stitch held fast, and in that suspended moment, preservation was no longer just about paper and ink, but about something newly alive, held carefully between two pairs of gloved hands. Days had bled into one another inside the archive, measured not by sunlight, but by the slow migration of dust through lamplight. It was late, so late that the building itself seemed to sag with fatigue. The air smelled of old paper and dried glue, a scent that clung to the lungs. Alara's shoulders ached from hours of careful posture. Her eyes burned, and her hands moved on habit alone, reverent but tired. Exhaustion dulled the edges of caution, turning routine into risk. The sound came without warning. Not loud, not explosive, but sharp enough to slice through the quiet like a blade. A brief, brittle rip of paper fibers surrendering under a fraction of misplaced force echoed far louder in Alara's mind than it ever could in the room itself. Time seemed to lurch, then slow, as the weight of that tiny noise spread outward, contaminating the silence with dread. Alara gasped as the sound registered. Oh my God! Her breath caught painfully in her throat. Heat rushed to her face, then drained away just as fast, leaving her cold. Her fingers hovered uselessly above the book, as if afraid to touch it again, as if the damage might somehow worsen under her gaze. The torn edge stared back at her, obscene in its imperfection. From across the room, Arthur reacted to the noise.
What was that sound?
Arthur's voice carried from the other side of the room, steady but alert, cutting through the oppressive quiet. Chairs, tables, and shelves of centuries-old volumes all bore silent witness as his attention snapped toward her. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous, measured not in steps, but in consequence. Tears welled as Alara struggled to speak. I turned the page and it tore. Arthur, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. My hand slipped. The words tumbled out of her, tangled with breath and panic. Tears blurred her vision, turning ink and margins into dark smears. In her chest, Her heart hammered as if trying to break free, each beat accusing her of carelessness and unworthiness. The book felt heavier now, transformed from an object of devotion into evidence of failure. Arthur crossed the room quickly, his footsteps controlled but urgent, leather soles whispering against the floor. Then came stillness as he stood beside her and leaned in to inspect the page. The world narrowed to the space between his gloved hands and the wound in the paper. "Please don't fire me. I'll pay for it. I'll work for free." The plea escaped her before she could stop it, raw and humiliating. In her mind, images cascaded of dismissal and disgrace, of doors quietly closing that she had barely managed to open. Her identity felt as fragile as the torn sheet before them, one wrong motion away from splitting completely.
Ilara, breathe. It is a clean tear. It is repairable. Japanese tissue paper and wheat starch paste. We can fix it.
His tone lowered and became deliberate, as if calibrating each word to slow her unraveling. He described the damage not as a catastrophe, but as a problem with a solution, anchoring her spiraling thoughts to technique and tradition. In the careful language of conservation, disaster shrank into procedure and fear into method. Ilara's breathing quickened beyond her control. "I ruined it. I ruin everything. I'm clumsy. I'm stupid." Her chest rose and fell too fast, breaths scraping shallowly through her lungs. The words she hurled at herself felt rehearsed and worn smooth from repetition. They clung to her like old labels she could never quite peel away, each insult reinforcing a narrative she feared was true.
Stop it. Stop insulting my assistant. Look at me. Paper tears. Leather cracks. Ink fades. Entropy is the law of the universe. Things break. The miracle is not that they stay perfect. The miracle is that we can fix them.
His voice cut through her spiral, sudden and commanding. He turned her chair to face him, the motion firm but not unkind, forcing her attention upward. His gaze held hers, unflinching. In his words, decay was not failure, but fact, and repair an act of quiet defiance against time itself. "I'm not fixable." The admission slipped out small and bare, stripped of argument. It hovered between them, heavier than the book and heavier than the night. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath.
Everything is fixable if you have the right tools and patience. You are not ruined, Ilara. You are just foxed. Do you know that term, foxing? Some collectors think it is damage. I think it adds character. Now dry your eyes. We have work to do.
He reached out and brushed her cheek with the cotton of his glove, wiping away a tear. The fabric absorbed the moisture, leaving behind a faint warmth. His hand lingered only a moment before smoothing her hair in a steady, grounding gesture. In that simple act, the room seemed to soften, and the torn page no longer felt like an ending, but the beginning of careful, patient repair. The bowl sat heavy on the work table, its rim nicked and stained by years of use. Inside it, wheat paste was being worked into life, the mixture answering each slow rotation with a soft, viscous sound. It was not merely wet. It clung, resisted, sighed. The room carried the faint scent of grain and warmth, as if a kitchen and an archive had briefly agreed to share the same breath. Every movement drew out a sound that felt intimate and private, like something not meant to be rushed.
Wheat paste. We make it by hand. It must be smooth, no lumps. Here, put your hands in the bowl.
Arthur's voice cut through the quiet with the calm authority of ritual. This was not instruction delivered for efficiency, but for transmission, knowledge passed from body to body. The bowl was positioned between them like an offering. The paste waited, pale and unassuming, yet charged with purpose, as if it understood that it was about to become something more than a simple mixture of flour and water. Without gloves? The question slipped out before Ilara could stop it, born from instinct rather than defiance. She was used to barriers, fabric, latex, the thin protections that kept the world at a manageable distance. Standing here, faced with the expectation of direct contact, she felt suddenly exposed, as though the bowl were asking for more than her hands.
Yes, you need to feel the consistency.
At his insistence, Alara lowered her hands into the bowl. The paste yielded immediately, swallowing her fingers and coating her skin. Heat surprised her first, not hot, but alive, a retained warmth that suggested recent effort and ongoing change. The texture was uneven, resistant in places, silkier in others, and it pressed back as if acknowledging her touch. This was not passive material. It responded.
It's warm.
Arthur watched closely as she began to move, noting the subtle tension in her wrists and the uncertainty in her rhythm. He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing until his presence altered the air itself. From behind her, his gaze followed the path of her hands, measuring speed, pressure, and patience. The act of watching became its own form of participation.
Keep stirring.
Alara obeyed, circling her hands through the paste. The sound deepened, growing thicker and slower. Her shoulders tightened with concentration, each rotation an attempt to meet an expectation she could feel, but not yet fully understand. The bowl anchored her, demanded attention, and pulled her awareness downward into her palms.
Slower, you are rushing.
Arthur reached forward and placed his hands over hers. The contact was deliberate and steady, his palms guiding rather than forcing. Together, their hands moved in a shared rhythm, the paste folding into itself and smoothing under the synchronized motion. Time seemed to stretch, each circle deliberate, each second elongated, as if the act required reverence as much as precision.
Like this, rhythmic. Can you feel the texture changing?
With his hands enclosing hers, Alara became acutely aware of every sensation, the drag of the paste, the subtle shift as lumps dissolved, and the warmth spreading into her fingers. Her breath shortened, not from exertion, but from the intensity of focus. The paste responded to patience, rewarding restraint with cohesion and transforming under their shared control. Yes, it's getting thicker. Arthur leaned in further, his chin hovering near her shoulder, close enough that his breath brushed the fine hairs at her neck. His presence was grounding, almost ceremonial, as if he were anchoring her to a lineage older than either of them. The paste now moved as one body, glossy and uniform, a quiet testament to time-honored practice.
This paste has held history together for centuries. It creates a bond stronger than the paper itself.
His voice dropped, reverent, carrying the weight of countless bindings and countless hands repeating this same motion across generations. As he spoke, his attention shifted to a small smear along Alara's wrist, pale against her skin. He leaned closer, the observation delivered almost as a secret, shared only between them.
You have paste on your wrist.
The awareness of it made Alara suddenly self-conscious, as though she had been marked. The paste had cooled slightly on her skin, a faint tightening as it began to dry and claim its place. It felt symbolic, whether she wanted it to or not. "I will wash it." Arthur gently caught her wrist before she could pull away. The motion was unhurried and intentional. He lifted her hand, studying the small imperfection as if it mattered. Bringing it toward his mouth, he erased the distance with a quiet inevitability. The gesture, ancient and utilitarian, stripped of ornament yet heavy with meaning.
Allow me.
His lips brushed her skin, removing the paste with a simple and almost austere action. It was not indulgent or performative, but deeply instinctive, like an animal cleaning what should not be wasted. The contact lingered just long enough to be unmistakable, then ended, leaving a charged absence in its wake. Arthur. He withdrew immediately, restoring distance with practiced control. Whatever had surfaced in that brief moment was sealed away again and folded back into discipline. The room seemed to exhale, the quiet returning. thicker now with unspoken understanding.
Waste not, want not. Wash your hands, we start the binding.
The winter storm did not merely surround the archive, it laid siege to it. Wind howled through the ancient stone corridors like a living thing, probing for weakness and rattling the tall windows until the glass trembled in its leaded frames. Cold seeped from the floors and the walls alike, a slow, patient invasion that crept into bones and breath. In the vast reading hall, the hearth stood as the only defiance against the season, its fire roaring and snapping, throwing amber light across shelves heavy with centuries of fragile knowledge.
The heating system is struggling. Bring the blankets. We need to sleep in the library tonight to monitor the humidity levels.
Arthur's voice carried the weight of responsibility, calm but edged with fatigue. He moved through the space like a caretaker of both books and weather, glancing at gauges and hygrometers as though they were vital signs on a patient. Every fluctuation in warmth or moisture mattered here. Too much damp could warp pages. Too much dryness could make them crumble. Outside, the storm intensified, but inside, his focus narrowed to preservation, to vigilance, to staying awake with the fire as their silent ally. Sleep here? On the floor? Ilara looked around the immense library, its long tables and towering shelves rendered strange by firelight. The idea of sleeping on the hard floor seemed unreal, almost sacrilegious in a place meant for study and silence. Yet the cold made practicality unavoidable. Her breath fogged faintly as she spoke, and she hugged her arms closer, torn between discomfort and the intimacy implied by sharing the night in such a secluded, vulnerable space.
I have made a nest of cushions by the fire. It is cozy.
He gestured toward the hearth, where cushions and folded blankets had been arranged with surprising care. The firelight softened the severity of the room, turning stone into gold and shadow into something almost gentle. The makeshift nest looked humble but deliberate, as though he had anticipated not just the storm, but the need for warmth beyond temperature. In that small circle of light, the library felt less like an archive and more like a refuge. They settled down near the fire, the cushions sighing softly under their weight. The crackling flames filled the pauses between words, a steady, breathing sound that seemed to mark time. Sparks leapt upward and vanished into the chimney, while the storm outside continued its relentless assault. Within the hearth's glow, the cold retreated just enough to make stillness possible and to allow the night to stretch out before them, long and watchful. Arthur, why do you never take the gloves off, even when you eat, even when you relax? Her question slipped into the quiet like a careful hand placed on a shoulder. She had noticed the gloves from the beginning, the way they never left him, as constant as his measured tone and meticulous habits. Now, with the fire casting intimate light and the storm sealing them in, curiosity mingled with concern. The question was gentle, but it carried the weight of closeness and of wanting to know what lay beneath the careful barriers he maintained.
Because my hands are rough, I have scars and dry skin. I am afraid of damaging the things I touch. I am afraid of damaging you.
The confession hung between them, fragile as ash. Arthur stared into the fire as he spoke, as though the flames might translate what he feared to show. His gloved hands rested together, fingers interlaced, betraying tension despite their stillness. Years of caution and self-imposed distance pressed into his words. In the hush that followed, the fire seemed to lower its voice, acknowledging the vulnerability he had finally allowed to surface. "I am not paper, Arthur. I will not tear," she answered without hesitation, her tone steady and almost tender. The comparison to the books around them felt deliberate, as if she were reclaiming her own resilience within a place dedicated to fragility. Her gaze did not leave him. In that moment, she was not a visitor in the archive, but a living presence, warm and unafraid, challenging the careful logic he had built to keep himself and others safe.
You are more fragile than paper. Paper can be taped. If I break your heart, there is no wheat paste for that.
A long silence followed, thick and resonant. Arthur finally looked at her, the firelight revealing the depth of his fear more clearly than any words. He spoke like a conservator, faced with an irreplaceable artifact, aware that some damage could never be undone. The metaphor was imperfect, but sincere, born of years spent repairing what others had broken and dreading the one fracture he knew he could not fix. Alara leaned closer, the movement slow and intentional, as though she were approaching a skittish animal or a sacred object. Her hand hovered near his, not yet touching, offering choice rather than demand. The fire popped softly, punctuating the moment. In her request, there was trust, invitation, and a quiet insistence that connection, however risky, was worth the danger it carried. "See, take them off, please. I want to feel your skin." The sound of fabric sliding filled the space, amplified by the silence. Arthur removed one glove, then the other, each motion deliberate and almost ceremonial. The gloves came away reluctantly, as if they too resisted being parted from him. Beneath them, his bare hands emerged into the firelight, marked by time and labor. The storm outside seemed to pause, as though the world itself were holding its breath.
My hands are old.
His voice trembled as he looked down at them, seeing not just skin, but years of restraint and solitude. The lines, the scars, and the dryness were evidence of a life spent handling history more than humanity. Exposed now, his hands felt heavier and more vulnerable than they ever had beneath their protective covering. He waited, uncertain, bracing for judgment or withdrawal. "They are beautiful. You are warm and human." She touched his bare hand, her fingers brushing his skin with reverence. The contact was gentle and exploratory, as though she were learning a new language through touch. Warmth passed between them, undeniable and grounding. In her eyes, there was no disappointment, only recognition. The fire reflected there too, mirroring the quiet awe of the moment.
I have not touched another person without a barrier in 10 years. You feel like life.
Arthur grasped her hand fully then, skin on skin, the sensation surging through him like an electric shock. Breath caught in his chest, and for a heartbeat, the archive, the storm, and the centuries of silence all fell away. There was only warmth, contact, and the startling reminder that he was alive and capable of connection. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but by the fire, something essential had finally been restored. The rain did not simply fall outside the old house, it lingered, patient and insistent, tracing silver paths down the tall windows as though trying to read its way inside. Each drop carried the weight of evening, tapping against glass, roof, and stone with a hushed persistence that softened the world. The room was wrapped in lamplight and shadow, the scent of old paper and polished wood thick in the air, as if the house itself were holding its breath to listen. Arthur's voice rose and fell with the cadence of the printed words, measured and intimate, shaped by years spent among manuscripts and forgotten stories. The book rested open in his hands, its spine creased with familiarity, the pages whispering softly whenever his fingers shifted. His reading was not a performance, but an offering, each sentence allowed to settle fully before the next arrived, filling the quiet room as completely as the sound of rain.
Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same.
The words lingered after he spoke them, hanging between them like a held note. Arthur's fingers paused, then gently closed the book, the cover meeting the pages with a muted finality. The act felt ceremonial, as though he were sealing something precious away, not ending it, but preserving it for later.
Bronte, a classic.
Alara lay stretched along the sofa, her head resting in his lap, her body aligned with the quiet rhythm of his breathing. From where she lay, the world narrowed to the rise and fall of his chest, the warmth of his presence, the steady reassurance of being held without demand. The rain outside faded into a distant backdrop, less sound than sensation. Read it again. I love your voice. It vibrates in my chest. Arthur's hand moved almost unconsciously, his bare fingers threading slowly through her hair. Each stroke was unhurried and deliberate, as though he were learning the shape of her through touch alone. The gesture carried a tenderness that words could not easily name, a quiet confession made in silence.
Ilari?
He hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the darkened windows, toward the imagined eyes of a world that always seemed ready to judge. The room felt suddenly smaller, the intimacy edged with awareness.
This arrangement, us living here, people will talk. The old archivist and his young ward. It is a cliché.
For a moment, the rain seemed louder, as if punctuating his doubt. Alara shifted slightly, gathering herself, the movement subtle but resolute. I do not care about clichés. I care about you. You fixed me, Arthur. She lifted her hand into the lamplight, holding it there with quiet pride. The fingers were steady now, no longer betraying the tremor that once lived beneath her skin. When I came here, I was shaking. Now, look, still. Arthur leaned down, his lips brushing her palm with a reverence that bordered on gratitude. The simple contact carried the weight of everything unsaid between them.
You fixed yourself. I just provided the glue.
He paused, as if bracing himself, then continued, his tone shifting from intimate to cautiously hopeful.
But Alara, there is a gala next week, the museum charity ball. I have to attend. I want you to come with me.
The idea seemed to ripple through the room, unsettling the comfortable quiet. Alara's brows knit slightly as she imagined bright lights, unfamiliar faces, and herself among them. To a party? I have nothing to wear. Arthur's expression softened, a hint of amusement and confidence crossing his face, as though he had been waiting for this exact concern.
I have a collection, vintage silk, 1920s, in the attic. Preservation quality. We will find you a dress.
The attic breathed with the slow patience of a century. Dust hung in the air like a suspended memory, glowing faintly in the slanted afternoon light that slipped through a small round window. Every movement stirred history awake. The soft rustle of layered fabric, the whisper of silk brushing against wood, the faint metallic murmur of a zipper being drawn with reverence rather than haste. This was not merely a room, but a sanctuary of preserved moments, where time had been folded carefully and stored away.
Careful, the lace is 100 years old. Turn around.
Arthur's hands hovered before they touched, as if he feared that too much pressure might fracture the past itself. The lace trembled between his fingers, fragile yet defiant, each thread carrying the quiet labor of unknown hands long gone. When he guided her to turn, his movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, as though dressing her was an act of devotion rather than preparation. Does it fit? The question lingered between them, lighter than dust, yet heavier than it sounded. Alara stood very still, aware of every place where fabric met skin, of how the dress seemed to recognize her shape as if it had been waiting decades for this exact moment. The attic fell silent, holding its breath alongside her.
It fits like a dream. You look like you stepped out of a history book. Timeless.
His breath caught before the words fully formed, a sharp, involuntary intake that betrayed him. In the mirror, he saw not just Alara reflected back, but an impossible convergence of eras. The dress clung with elegant restraint, its age transformed into dignity rather than decay. For a heartbeat, the present loosened its grip, and he forgot what century claimed them. Arthur stood behind her now, close enough that his presence warmed the air at her back. Their reflections aligned in the glass, her luminous and still, him slightly shadowed, edges softened by time and doubt. The mirror became a quiet witness, binding them together in a single frame.
I am an old dusty book, and you are the gold leaf illustration.
The words were not playful. They were confessional. Arthur saw himself in spines worn smooth by countless hands, in pages yellowed by years of being opened and closed. And in Alara, he saw brilliance, something rare and radiant, meant to catch the light and draw the eye, transforming the ordinary act of reading into reverence. Do not say that. You are the leather binding that holds me together. Her response came softly but firmly, anchoring him. In her voice was certainty, the kind that refuses to let self-doubt stand unchallenged. She did not turn to face him, yet her words reached back, wrapping around his vulnerabilities, stitching them into something stronger. Arthur's hands moved then, gentle but resolute, guiding her to face him. The world narrowed to the space between them, to the faint scent of old fabric and dust, to the quiet thunder of unspoken consequences.
Alara, if we go to this ball, everyone will know. I will claim you publicly. Are you ready for that?
This was not a question asked lightly. It carried the weight of doors opening and others closing forever. To be seen, to be named, to be chosen without disguise, such acts could not be undone. The attic seemed to lean in, listening, as if the very walls understood what was at stake. Yes, claim me. The answer rang clear and unwavering. In that single word, followed by another, she stepped forward not just into the dress, but into the future it promised. The attic exhaled at last, dust settling back into silence, as history quietly made room for something new. The gala breathed like a living organism. Chandeliers spilled warm gold across marble floors, and the air shimmered with layered sounds of polite laughter, crystal glasses touching, and a string quartet weaving silk-soft, classical melodies through the crowd. Conversations rose and fell in careful crescendos, the practiced cadence of donors, curators, and scholars performing civility as an art form. Beneath it all lingered the faint scent of old paper and polished wood, a cathedral built for culture and quiet power. From within that cultivated murmur, a presence cut forward with deliberate intent. Shoes approached at an unhurried pace, each step confident and invasive. Professor Vance emerged from the crowd, a familiar silhouette sharpened by memory, Alara's former teacher and once an authority she had trusted. His eyes appraised her with clinical satisfaction, as if he believed he had found proof of his old judgments. The space between him and Alara collapsed too quickly.
Well, Alara, I heard you dropped out, and now you are the assistant to Arthur Blackwood?
The sneer arrived before the words fully landed, curling his mouth as if he were tasting something sour. His gaze flicked over her attire and posture, the subtle signs of belonging she wore now, and rejected them all. The cruelty was practiced, honed in lecture halls and closed-door evaluations, the kind that masqueraded as honesty while seeking only to wound.
I see you found an easier way to get good grades, sleeping with the donor.
The insult struck like a sudden winter gust. Alara's body reacted before her mind could catch up. Muscles locked, breath thinned, and the room seemed to tilt. The music dulled at the edges, chatter smearing into a distant hum. Old fears surfaced uninvited as her pulse thudded in her ears, and she stood frozen, every instinct urging retreat, even as her feet refused to move. Professor Vance. Before the silence could deepen into humiliation, another presence intervened. Arthur Blackwood stepped into the narrow space Vance had claimed, precise and unyielding. The temperature of the moment changed. His posture was relaxed, yet immovable, like a door quietly closing. When he spoke, his voice carried a glacial calm that demanded attention without rising above the room.
Professor, I believe you are standing in my light. Move. Blackwood, I am just saying hello to my former failure of a student.
Arthur did not retreat. He stepped closer instead, the distance shrinking to something unmistakably threatening. His eyes never left Vance's, and the gala seemed to lean away from them as guests instinctively turned and pretended not to listen. Authority radiated from him, not loud or theatrical, but absolute, the kind that rewrote rules simply by existing.
She is not a failure. She is the finest restorationist I have ever met. Her hands are steadier than yours ever were, and if you ever speak to her with disrespect again, I will pull my funding from your university library, and I will make sure you never touch a rare book again. Do you understand?
The threat settled with surgical precision. Vance's bravado collapsed, replaced by a flicker of fear that betrayed how well he understood the stakes. The future he had taken for granted wavered on a single sentence. Around them, the gala resumed its careful breathing, but the damage was done.
Yes, sorry.
Vance retreated in a hurried scuttle, shoulders hunched as he vanished back into the anonymity of the crowd. The space he left behind felt cleaner and quieter. Arthur turned then, the hardness draining from his expression as if it had never been there, leaving concern in its wake.
Are you all right?
You defended me. The words were small, but they carried the weight of something long denied. Alara felt warmth seep back into her limbs as the room sharpened into focus again. For the first time that night, the music sounded beautiful instead of distant.
Always. You are my library, my most precious collection. No one touches the collection.
The auction hall breathed with a collective tension, a cathedral of wealth and whispered ambition. Velvet seats absorbed the rustle of programs, while crystal chandeliers cast a restrained glow over faces trained to betray nothing. Every cough felt amplified, every pause intentional. At the podium, the auctioneer's cadence cut through the air like a metronome, measuring desire in millions, the room leaning forward as if the manuscript itself were pulling them closer.
Do I hear 5 million?
Alara's breath caught as the words landed. Before her eyes, beneath the glass and guarded light, lay centuries of ink and vellum, history bound in fragile skin. The codex seemed to hum with memory, its presence heavier than gold. Her heart pounded, not with greed, but with recognition. The way a restorer recognizes a wounded thing calling for care. Arthur, that is the manuscript, the one you have been looking for 20 years, the Codex of Siena. Arthur did not look at the book at first. His gaze remained steady and composed, the way it always did when he had already decided something long before anyone else knew. 20 years of searching, of dead ends and rumors, had led to this quiet, suspended moment.
Yes.
With an unhurried grace, he lifted the paddle. The simple motion carried decades of patience, of restraint finally released. The number he was about to speak was not a boast. It was a conclusion.
6 million.
A ripple ran through the audience, subtle gasps, raised brows, and quick mental recalculations from those who knew when they were beaten. The auctioneer's gavel hovered, savoring the silence like a final note before applause.
Sold to Mr. Blackwood.
Alara turned to Arthur, disbelief breaking into joy. The hall around them seemed to blur, the crowd dissolving into background noise as the reality of the moment rushed in. You got it. Oh my God, Arthur, it is the crown jewel of your collection. Arthur finally looked at her. Not at the codex and not at the crowd. At her. In his eyes was something quieter than triumph, something deliberate and tender, as if this outcome had never been about ownership at all.
No.
The single word gently redirected the moment, turning it inward.
It is a gift for you.
Alara's smile faltered, replaced by shock. The weight of the sum pressed down on her chest, not as a number, but as responsibility and impossibility. What? I cannot take a $6 million book. Arthur's voice remained calm and patient, as though he were explaining a truth he had carried for years.
It is not for you to own. It is for you to restore. It is a lifetime project.
He spoke of time the way others spoke of weather, vast and inevitable, something to be lived inside.
It will take 50 years to fix the pages properly.
He reached for her hand, with slow certainty. His fingers closed around hers, grounding the moment and anchoring it in warmth.
I am asking you to stay with me for 50 years, to work on this book and to work on us.
Tears welled in Alara's eyes, blurring the lights above them into halos. 50 years stretched before her, not as a burden, but as a horizon. 50 years? Arthur's thumb brushed over her knuckles, a quiet reassurance that time, like the codex, was something they would tend together.
Or until the pages turn to dust, whichever comes last. Will you stay?
The question held no pressure, only invitation. The room seemed to wait with her. I will stay. I will stay forever. The world narrowed to the space between them as Arthur leaned in. His kiss was unhurried and reverent, as if acknowledging a vow older than words. Around them, the auction hall returned to its noise and motion, but for that moment, time itself seemed to pause and honor the promise they had just made. The library had returned to its natural state of reverent stillness, as if the building itself were exhaling after a long-held breath. Towering shelves stood like patient sentinels, their spines catching the low, amber glow cast by the fireplace. The fire did not roar, it murmured, each soft crack and settling ember sounding like a private thought spoken aloud. Shadows breathed along the walls, stretching and retreating in slow motion, while the scent of old paper, leather bindings, and wood smoke blended into something timeless. This was not silence born of emptiness, but of peace, an earned quiet, layered and profound. Alara's presence registered first as movement, subtle but deliberate. The gentle sound of a page turning cut through the hush, not as an intrusion, but as a continuation of it. The paper whispered as it slid beneath her fingers, the texture faintly rough, reassuringly real. That small sound carried weight, proof of attention, of care, of a mind still engaged even while the world outside had finally receded. Each turned page marked time not by urgency, but by choice, as though she were savoring every second rather than spending it. Arthur sat nearby in his chair, his posture relaxed in a way that would have once been unthinkable. His hands were bare, no gloves, no barrier between his skin and the world. The firelight traced the lines of his fingers and the quiet strength in his wrists, revealing a man who had finally stopped bracing himself against touch. He watched Alara not with impatience, but with a soft insistence, the kind that comes from certainty rather than need.
Come here.
I'm working. Her reply came without irritation, only focus. Yet beneath her words lingered the awareness of him, the gravitational pull that had nothing to do with demand and everything to do with belonging. Arthur's gaze did not waver. He leaned forward just slightly, the chair creaking in quiet acknowledgement, as if the furniture itself understood the intimacy of the moment.
The book can wait. I cannot. Sit on my lap.
The invitation was gentle but absolute. Alara closed the book with care, pressing her palm briefly against its cover as though promising to return. When she rose and crossed the small distance between them, the room seemed to narrow its focus. She lowered herself onto his lap, the motion unhurried and deliberate. Arthur's arms came around her, firm and warm, encircling her as if he had been waiting for this exact weight, this exact fit. Their bodies aligned with an ease that spoke of habit transformed into home.
Do you miss the noise? The city?
The question drifted between them, carried on the slow rise and fall of his breath. Outside these walls lay memories of crowded streets, relentless motion, and a life measured by urgency. Here, time moved differently. The fire popped softly, punctuating the pause, while Arthur's heartbeat pressed steady against Alara's back, an unspoken reminder of what had replaced the chaos. No, I like the quiet, because in the quiet, I can hear your heart. Her words settled deep, threading themselves through Arthur's chest. The quiet she spoke of was not the absence of sound, but the presence of meaning. Wrapped in each other, they existed within a small, sacred pocket of stillness, where nothing demanded and nothing was missing. His heart answered her, listening with calm, steady affirmation, a rhythm no longer guarded and no longer hidden.
I spent my life preserving the past, protecting dead things from decaying. But she taught me that some things are meant to be touched. Some things get better with age, like love and like us.